Today I'm going to talk about Visitor in Blackwood Grove. This is a game that I backed on Kickstarter. I got it recently, very recently, and I've already played it 3 times because it's really easy to learn, teach, and play. It only plays in about 5 or 10 minutes. It's a little bit like Mysterium distilled down into a 5 or 10 minute game, and mostly competitive. The idea of Visitor in Blackwood Grove is that these aliens have landed and they've set up a force field, and the aliens have identified a kid, kind of like all 80s movies involving aliens. They've identified a kid as being friendly, and they want to help that kid get into the force field, but they want to keep out all the federal agents who are also trying to get into this force field. The aliens don't speak language, and so instead they use images, these image cards, to convey the rule of their force field, like what can pass through and what can't pass through. They do this in the game by the first really cool thing, and I'll get to this game does something that I think is absolutely brilliant. I'll get to that in a second. But the first cool thing I think it does is it allows the visitor, one player plays the visitor, the alien, it allows them to pick any rule at all. There are a few example cards they can use, but really they can pick any rule. For example, a rule that they could pick is things made by humans. And so I guess all these things that I held up are things that are made by humans. But that's okay, because it's okay for the rule to apply to anything or nothing, or some things and not other things. The alien designates this on their turn by putting cards either inside the force field. There's a board that has a force field on it. They put it inside the force field, or if it doesn't meet their rule, they put it outside of the force field. So everything applies to this, no matter what cards the visitor has to use, or the cards that the players are showing to the visitor to learn more about the rule. They either do apply or they don't apply. Really cool construct. But the thing I really like in this game is how players deduce and solve the clue, solve the rule, figure out what the rule is, without giving it away completely or eliminating themselves from the game. I haven't played the game Clue in a long time, so hopefully I say this correctly, but in Clue, as I recall, when you're ready to solve it, solve who did the murder, where they did it, and what murder weapon they used, you get one shot to do that. You say what you think it is. I can't remember if you say it out loud or if you write it down, but you get one shot to do it, and if you're wrong, you're just out of the game. That's it. That may have been revised in future editions of Clue, but that's how I remember it. This game solves that problem in a brilliant way. Basically, when you're ready to solve the problem, if you know the rule that the visitor thought of for this force field, and you think you know for sure, what you do is you draw 4 random cards from the top of the deck. There's this big deck. You'll have some in hand that you use on your turn, but you have this big deck of cards. You'll draw 4 of them, you'll line them up in a row, and then you'll push some of them forward and leave some of them back. And you're doing this to show, okay, I think these cards meet the rule, and I think these other cards don't meet the rule. You're communicating what you think the rule is using these 4 random cards to the visitor without saying it out loud. And meanwhile, behind their little screen, so the visitor has this little screen, they use these little tokens to line up with those same cards to show which cards meet the rule and which don't. So when they're all ready, the visitor will lift up their screen and show the players, okay, like these 2 meet the rule, they go in. These 2 do not meet the rule, they go outside of the force field. And if those pairings, how the visitor designated with these tokens, if that matches up with what the player guessed, that player wins the game. And if they're the kid, the visitor also wins the game. What I think is so brilliant about this is that the player doesn't have to say the rule out loud, but there's still a risk in trying to guess, because if you guess incorrectly, all the other players see this information. They see the cards that meet or don't meet the rule. So you're still giving information to other players, putting a little bit of a risk on the player who's trying to prove the rule, but you're doing it without eliminating them from the game or giving it away completely to the other players. I think this is brilliant. A brilliant way of defining a rule and keeping the game going and keeping it interesting. Of course, it is possible. I think the one downside of this is that it is possible for you to get lucky with these and just happen to guess. Maybe you're close, but you're not but not really all that close. You could even do it completely randomly and get it right. But this is a 5 or 10 minute game, so I think that's perfectly okay. As long as you don't have a player who is like ruining the experience by always just guessing randomly, I think this game can be a ton of fun for any group. Yeah, just a brilliant mechanism of having players solve a hidden clue without totally giving it away or eliminating them from the game. If you can think of another game that does this, I think Mystery of the Abbey is a game like this where you're trying to solve a problem. Mysterium is one, Clue is one. If you can think of other games that do this and have a unique way of letting players state what their guess is, what their solution is, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Or if you have a favorite mechanism in Visitor in Blackwood Grove, I'd love to hear about that as well. Thanks.